Today marks the release of George A. Romero's Martin on 4K UHD from Second Sight Films. I spent the best part of this past weekend watching this and listening to the commentaries and just going over everything in this package. So in this video, I'm going to let you know whether I think it's worth you picking it up. I'll take a closer look at the packaging a bit later on in the video, but for now I just want to talk about what I thought of the film itself and the picture and audio quality of the presentation on the disc. This new 4K release was actually my first time with this movie, and I was absolutely pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed watching it. The story of Martin follows this young man carrying out these murders and then drinking the blood of his victims. But this is not a typical vampire story because he believes that he is not a vampire, but it is reinforced by his family that he is a vampire. He is Nosferatu, but because of this he is exiled. This film plays a lot differently to the Romero zombie movies that I've seen. This is definitely more of a character study. I hate that term, but it's kind of appropriate for what this is. We're looking at this young man who is carrying out these horrible crimes, but we do sympathize with him because of how he has arrived at where he is in the movie. There is the theme of nature versus nurture, because he has been brought up to believe that this is how he is and that there isn't any other way for him. And wrapped up in this is this sexual repression, which is dealt with in the movie as well. And it just all leads up to this incredibly shocking climax, which I was not prepared for. Let's now talk a bit about how the film looks on this 4K release. It's worth mentioning that apparently for a very long time, it was not possible to watch this movie in any sort of decent quality. Like I said, this was my first time watching it, but I believe that before this, there were only DVDs that may have been VHS rips that were available, so you just couldn't watch this in great quality. So I think for many fans of the movie, it was great news when Second Sight announced years ago that they were doing this 4K restoration in collaboration with Michael Gornick, the original director of photography on the movie. There were actually some doubts as to how good this could look on a 4K disc, because the film was shot on a very low budget, and that's apparent when you watch it. But the actual film stock that was used, it was shot on a 16mm reverse stock, which was quite unusual unless you were working on a very low budget. What this reverse stock means is there's no original camera negative. The film was shot in positive just to save money so that they could just print it directly off that and there wouldn't be additional processing of the negative back then. The film was then printed to 35mm dupe negative prints, and they were what were used for distribution. The 16mm reverse stock is long gone, so that was not used in the restoration process for this movie, and I think that's where some people had doubts as to how good this could look, because you weren't going back to the original film stock that the film was shot on. You were going from this 35mm dupe negative where some detail would have already been lost, perhaps, in that process. With all of that said, how does it look on a 4K UHD disc then? To my eyes, it looked very, very good indeed. It isn't the sharpest image in terms of detail, especially if you compare it to some sort of modern digital movie. But in terms of the film grain, this is quite a grainy presentation, but that is a good thing, of course. It looks very natural, very filmic. You can tell that this was a low budget production, but I think that you can also tell that some detail has been lost because it is using that 35mm print, although that could just be my view because I know that that's what has happened. Maybe watching it fresh, you might not even be aware that that was the case. So the presentation might not be the sharpest, but I think it does look pristine and beautiful. Very filmic because of the grain. A large portion of the film is set at night in darkness, and in those sequences The black levels look absolutely perfectly resolved. And to my eyes, there was no presence of any sort of digital compression artifacts. There was certainly no appearance of any sort of digital smoothing in the image. So in that regard, it looked absolutely beautiful. And then with the presence of the HDR grade, which is HDR10+, so no Dolby Vision or anything like that, it looks great with this HDR grade. The colours look beautiful. It is sort of kind of a muted colour palette of a movie, but in the sequences with the blood, I mean, the blood is very vibrant. Maybe not the most realistic looking blood ever, but with these movies, you don't come for the realistic looking blood. Anyway, Tom Savini's effects do look absolutely great on this 4K disc. And Tom Savini even plays one of the characters in the movie, which, was very fun to watch as well. So my verdict on the 4K video quality of this Second Sight 4K release is that it is a brilliant presentation. Again, I have nothing to compare it to because I hadn't seen this film before, but I imagine those people that had only seen it on some crusty old DVD VHS transfers, you're going to be very, very pleased with this indeed. Then in terms of the audio, there are 3 tracks on this, DTS HD, so no Dolby Atmos or anything like that, but you've got a 5.1 track, a 2.0, and then you've got the mono track. I had listens to all of these different tracks and they all sounded great to me, indeed. I think it's going to come down to personal preference for which one you'd want to go for. I actually quite enjoyed listening to the mono track, which is obviously not going to push your systems if you've got a big surround sound system. But in terms of what's going on in the soundtrack with the music and the effects and everything, it isn't a soundtrack that has a lot of what I would say complicated sound. So it doesn't have a lot of bassy, booming, low frequency sounds, and also doesn't have a lot of really like high frequency shrieking sounds. So it's not a very complicated audio track, and I think that's quite a good thing. It just sounds perfectly resolved on all of these audio tracks. I'm not the biggest audio expert anyway, so it'll be interesting for me to see what other people are saying about the audio on this release. But for me, I was absolutely pleased with how the audio was presented. So audio and video, this release gets a big thumbs up from me. So if that's all you care about, then that's all you need to know. I highly recommend getting this release. But of course there is more because this is a limited edition package. So we're going to have a quick look at the packaging now and then talk about all of the extra special features that are on the disc as well. As we've come to expect from Second Sight films, the rigid hard case presentation is absolutely top notch. Second Sight are always consistent. We can always rely on them for great outer packaging on these limited edition releases. The front cover is what I think was one of the original theatrical posters on this spine. It's very clean here. And on the back, you get this with the cross and the dripping blood. When you buy this, it does come with the typical J card with all of the information on the back of this. So you could choose to keep this on or keep it off, or whatever you'd like. Now we'll have a quick look at what you get inside this package. They are packed quite tightly in here, so it might take a bit of maneuvering to get them out. So first of all, we have the discs that are housed in this packaging here, a very nice looking red colour. And here they are. So the discs that you get in here, there is a CD of the soundtrack from Donald Rubinstein, so all of the music that's used in the film. You get the regular Blu-ray edition here, and you get the 4K disc here. You also get this booklet inside the packaging, and rather than a booklet, it's actually a book. This runs at over 100 pages. And inside here, you've got all sorts of essays from many of the kind of collaborators on Blu-ray releases that you like to read from. So many of them appear in here. This is new artwork made for this release. And yeah, inside there's lots of high quality photos, images, and the book just feels very high quality indeed. So there's a lot to sink your teeth into, pun intended, in this book. And lastly, within the physical package, you get some collectible art cards. Now, normally, you know that I hate art cards. I think they're kind of pointless. I don't see what you're meant to do with them. But that's when they are just stills from the film itself. These are actually new artwork pieces, and these are the characters within the film. And I actually really enjoy these pieces as well. I don't know if I'm going to be displaying them anywhere, but they are very nice to have because they aren't just images from the movie. So these are a nice touch, and I'm actually impressed with these art cards. Maybe Second Sight have been listening to me, probably not. But yes, more of this, less of the stills from the movies. So that's all of the packaging, everything that you get inside of this beautiful limited edition release. All that's left to talk about now are those special features that you'll find on the discs in the package. So as it says on the J card, this is a new 4K restoration, which we've already talked about. Something I forgot to mention earlier, which was quite interesting when I was looking up about this release and some of the things that were going on. It was rumoured that there was a new cut of the movie that was found, a much longer black and white cut, a director's cut from Romero, which had long been thought to be destroyed. And Second Sight actually halted the release of this for a while to actually check whether this was something that could be included on the release. I think it turns out that an agreement couldn't be made with whoever holds the rights to that cut or something like that. It just couldn't be included on the release. And who knows if that's something that we will see ever, but that will be interesting. A 3-hour black and white cut of Martin. I would definitely check that out if it's ever made available. But sadly, not for this release. You do get a whopping 4 audio commentaries on this release, which is absolutely brilliant. I love audio commentaries. They're great even just for listening to when you're not watching the film. I know me and some of my friends like ripping the audio commentaries from the discs and just listening to them when we're commuting to work or doing the chores around the house. Because if you've seen the film before, you don't necessarily need to be watching the movie while listening to the audio commentary. So there are 2 historic commentaries with George A. Romero, Tom Savini, some of the cast and crew, and then there are 2 brand new commentaries made for this release, one from Travis Crawford and one from our friend Kat Ellinger. Those 2 historic commentaries obviously go a lot into the production of the movie, how it was made, you know, what they were doing in certain scenes, things like that. The 2 newer commentaries are more looking at the film in terms of where it sits in the genre of vampire movies, how we view the film through a modern lens and the themes within the movie. So it's great to get that kind of practical look at how the film was made, but then also the modern kind of interpretations and context for this film. Probably my favourite feature on this is the Taste the Blood of Martin. This was the new feature-length documentary about the making of this movie. Some of the cast and crew go back to the locations that were used, and they just talk about, you know, their memory making the movie and, you know, rediscovering it for this release. So for fans of Martin, I'm pretty sure you're getting this already, but just for that documentary alone, I think this is worth getting. There's also an interview with composer Donald Rubinstein, and then there's a short film from Tony Buber called J. Roy New and Used Furniture, which, you know, is an interesting addition to this release. There's Making Martin, a recounting, and then there's also the trailer, TV, and radio spots for the promotion of the movie when it was released. I think that about covers the special features and everything to do with this release. So this was a look, a review at the new Martin 4K UHD from Second Sight Films. It gets my recommendation, absolutely. If you're a fan of Romero or vampire movies or just 70s gritty, independent looking, filmic looking movies, then this is absolutely one to get. If you're just looking for a 4K release that is going to be, you know, pinpoint sharp and really show off your system, This is probably not what you want to get, but I would never recommend anyone to get a disc just for that alone. So this gets my fullest recommendation, and if you do want to purchase this, you can use the links in the description below. It helps support the channel at no additional cost to you, and so I thank you if you choose to do that. If you want more videos about boutique Blu-ray collecting and 4K collecting, then stick around on the channel, click the video that's presented on screen right now, and you can get some more recommendations from me. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you soon.